In this video, I'll show you the process I went through in order to get these low poly pixel art props. Stay until the end to see how I fit them together to make the 3D environments for my game. Welcome to Nagai Robotics. This is Synthetic Girlfriend. Hey peeps! June has been over for a week, so it's time for another monthly devlog as per usual. In case you are new here, welcome to another devlog for my indie game, Synthetic Girlfriend. Synthetic Girlfriend is a story-driven puzzle video game where you romance cute robotic girls, and the choices you make and puzzles you solve affect the outcome of the story. Alright, now that you are up to speed, let's get into it. I started this month working on the 3D models for the characters that didn't have any yet. However, I quickly lost momentum because I was really tired of dealing with character modeling since I've been doing that a lot for the last couple of months. I also ran into some issues with Mika's model. Her mesh got completely detached from her armature at some point. Hopefully, it will be easier to join both of them together this time, since I've been consistently optimizing her model bit by bit. Anyways, I thought I should work on Aries or Aila's model since maybe that will be refreshing, but after a bit of tinkering, the issues looked weird. This was the point where I realized I should move away from character modeling for a while, and for real this time. So, I decided to move on to something different that will improve the game's presentation a bit. You can probably judge by the title of this video what that is. That's right, environment modeling. I was thinking of having this clean, sleek, square look to everything, tons of solid colors, whites and grays, and I also really dig the low poly pixel art aesthetic, and I remember a couple of games I enjoyed had these visuals to them. So I took some time to play through them and watch some videos to gather some inspiration. So I caught myself watching some footage of Metal Gear Solid 2 and Megaman Legends, and I also played through Mirror's Edge and one of my all-time favorite puzzle games, Portal. Their textures look a bit more grungy than I remembered for some reason, but the whole blocky / panel-y looking textures were still there, and that's what I wanted to base my tilesets on. After doing some research, I noticed that the usual approach for environment making in Unity is to make modular sets of assets that you can mix and match together to create a whole map. I worked with modular assets before, in the form of 2D pixel art tiles. Throughout my years doing pixel art, I made a ton of tiles, and I found that it's legit one of my favorite things to do because it gives you the stability of having to work on a grid, but you also have the freedom to insert some randomness and variation to it, while also having that side of puzzle solving when having to put them together and making them look organic and cohesive. I really enjoy drawing tiles a lot. But this was 3D modeling, so I didn't have any experience making modular 3D tiles. However, I figured that it couldn't be that different from 2D tile making, right? You just gotta use cubes instead of 2D squares, I thought. However, as I opened Blender, I sat there looking at the default cube while having a small existential crisis for a second once I realized all the things that had to go into it to make it work. Like, all the tiles needing to have the same unit size so they are seamlessly tileable, having to manage the scale between what I modeled in Blender and how Unity interpreted it, having to make the 3D tiles look pixel perfect, having to make the textures for all sizes and making them look tileable on all of them, and so on. So I went back to a tutorial I used once to produce some low-spec assets, and it asked me to install a plugin called SpryTile. To my surprise, I already downloaded that plugin. In fact, it was right there on the sidebar from the start. Apparently I used this plugin before, but I can't even remember what for. So it got me curious. I thought, maybe I should give it a try, I might find it helpful. And oh boy, how helpful it was. This was exactly what I needed. Okay, so let me explain. The way this plugin works is that it takes a 2D texture map and builds square polygons out of it. With those polygons you can build 3D models, and with those 3D models you can build 3D tiles, and you get the idea. And the best part is that the plugin takes care of everything for you. You just gotta set the right amount of pixels per tile, the grid size, and you're set. No dealing with cumbersome UV mapping, no having to spend countless hours making the textures look pixel perfect, no having to worry about scale size, etc. So I took the plugin for a spin and made this small mocap you're seeing on the screen right now. This was a nice proof of concept of what I could do with this plugin and a really small amount of tiles I made in like half an hour or so, and it was already looking great. I even posted it on the game's Discord server and everyone loved it. So I tried to import the thing into Unity just to see how it fared, but I made a total mess as I just exported the whole thing as a single model and I couldn't figure out how to properly import the textures and such. I took the L with that one. This was definitely not the way of doing it, so I decided to leave this task for later after I looked into things a bit more carefully. After this, I decided that I should spend some time making more 2D tiles, so I had a broader palette to work with. And since the walls couldn't be flat because that would just look plain bad, I had to make textures for the sides and the top and the bottom faces too. After doing some quick math, I realized that I was working with a scale of 1 meter per tile, so if 32 pixels was how wide the wall was, I figured that 60 pixels was the magic number, since I decided to make each wall 50 centimeters thick. Not the most realistic honestly, but it's fine, it looks better this way anyway. Alright, so I made a bunch of walls and this sliding glass door thing. Time to test them on the actual game. There's some weird lines on the floor. Also, the walls look weird in some places. This showed me how important actually reading the documentation for the tools you are using is. After reading the docs and adjusting some settings, it was fixed. Alright, time to delete everything that was on the scene and replace the old Pro Builder assets with my very own. This took a bit because I had to properly align all the assets and clean up any remaining test geometry that I made with Pro Builder, but in the end, it turned out great. It still looks pretty flat and empty at this point though, so I knew I had to make more art and more 3D models. However, as I was playing around using the scene view camera in Unity, I had an idea. The 2D tiles were 32 by 32 pixels in resolution, right? They look nice, but I still thought they were a bit low resolution for my taste. I mean, they look fine from a distance, but since I also plan to have close-up camera angles during cutscenes, I figured they should be a bit higher resolution to allow for more detail. I know this amount of detail won't be seen during regular gameplay, but if I play my cards right, the textures will look good both during the gameplay sections and during the cutscenes. So I thought I should double the resolution. Instead of 32 by 32 pixels, I should go with 64 by 64 pixels. I knew this was going to be a bit more work overall, but I was hoping the trade-off was worth it. I had to go back and edit a bunch of tiles I already made to accommodate them for the new increased resolution. Thankfully, since they follow a simplistic art style all things considered, it was pretty easy to remake them. After redrawing the base tiles, I went back to Blender to see how the increased resolution looked on the models. And this is when I realized this was the right call. They look really neat. I was so thrilled about them that for a split second I considered going 128 by 128 pixels. But that would be a ton of extra work. I don't know if this is a factual, scientifically proven thing or not, but to me at least, when talking about pixel art, it seems that with each increase in resolution, the amount of work increases exponentially. So I'm not ready to make 128 by 128 pixel textures, sorry. I think 64 by 64 is a great middle ground between functionality and workload. Okay. I put the new models into Unity and made a side-to-side comparison. For all intents and purposes, from the overwall camera, they look almost identical, but going up close using the scene view camera, you can clearly see the increased detail that the new textures add. I was really happy with the results at this point. Okay, so I settled for 64 by 64 pixel textures. Now what? Well, I had to make a ton more tiles. So I booted up Sprite and just went crazy. I wanted to have some more textures for an outside area and also add some plants and whatnot. Here I was trying to make a gravel texture of sorts, but it didn't work at all, so I scrapped it. Then I went on and made some big leaves and a light fixture, alongside some wood, marble and concrete. Then I made the white bow awning thing. If you're wondering what these are for, stay until the end where I show you. I took these new textures into Blender and started making 3D models out of them using SpryTile. It's my first time modeling any sort of foliage, so I had to experiment a bit until things look right. I think these potted plants look fine enough for a first try. What do you think? At this point, I already solidified my workflow with SpryTile. It was as simple as opening a sprite, drawing something, opening Blender, modeling with the SpryTile add-on, and repeat. It was honestly super nice to have this figured out because it allowed me to make all sorts of assets in a short amount of time. Sweet! Everything was looking fine, but something was missing. It was all walls and floors and maybe some windows or potted plants, but what this place really needed was some nice everyday office objects like a vending machine or a trash can or tables and chairs. So I modeled a table and a stool, but then something popped up in my mind. Remember those old low-spec models I showed you previously on this video? Well, I originally modeled them thinking about the game, so it was time to get them into the actual game now. However, it wasn't as simple as to import them into Unity. I already did that with the water dispenser and it looked kinda out of place because the texture resolution was all over the place and the scale was also off. So I took the original pixel art textures and reworked them to be more in line with the rest of the assets I made throughout this month. All of the original textures were smaller than the scale I was using now, so I had to redraw them and adjust them accordingly. Oh yeah, something funny happened with the vending machine along the way. This was late at night, so my brain wasn't working properly at this point. For some reason I thought the scale for the vending machine was okay, but when I started making the model, I ended up with this dwarf-sized vending machine that was barely taller than the trash can. So I had to go back and remake it using some properly sized textures. I think this was the most detailed texture that I worked on this month, so it took a while. But after getting that out of the way, the vending machine was looking great alongside all the other props. Alright, so I made all these models and props. It was time to put it all together. This was a bit of a learning experience, since I never really did any proper environmental design. Pinterest was my friend through all of this, and I just borrow ideas I saw on other real-life places. Honestly, I'm a work-from-home shut-in, so I really have no idea on what an office actually is like. I don't know what else goes into an office or business building, so if you have any ideas on what props I could add, either from your own experience or because you think it will look cool, write them down in the comments. Your help will be greatly appreciated. Now, I told you at some point during the video that this wasn't the only scene I worked on, right? And you're probably still wondering what the white bow texture is for. Let me show you. That's right, Nagai Robotics has its own cafe inside. Now, I don't know if this is realistic at all. I know most workplaces have a lunch area, but for the purposes of the story of Synthetic Girlfriend, I decided to go all out and have this nice coffee place with tons of plants in it. This is where one of the main characters will be spending most of her time in. That's right, everyone please welcome Aila. She is an android that works at Nagai Robotics as a barista and also has a love for plants and interacting with people. Let's see what she has to say. Well, that was something. I'm not really sure about that. Thank you, Aila. Your words were enlightening. Well peeps, this is it for this month's devlog. As you can see, even if I put a lot of work on these environments, there's still a ton of placeholder and unfinished assets. But that's okay, because I'll keep working on them over time. I really wanna get this environment right though, because this is the place that the player will be spending most of their time in. Like from here, the player will be able to talk to almost all the relevant characters, get access to play the puzzles, and control the flow of the game pretty much. I think it was really important to move from Prototype City to this more realized environment, and it's giving us a glimpse into what the actual final game will look like. There is still a lot of areas to work on, like Yuri's office and his dad's, the lab, Aries room, the test chamber, bathrooms I guess, some streets, and probably a rooftop. And that's just for the Nagai Robotics building. I really should write all of this down, since one problem I have is that I keep coming up with scenes that take place in other interesting environments, so they'll probably keep piling up and up. Which is fine, I don't really mind making more assets, I really want my game to have a diverse backdrop selection. Anyway, I think that's all for this month. If you liked the video, don't forget to drop a like and maybe subscribe and share the video around and all those YouTube things that really help the channel grow and also help the game to get noticed. Thank you so much for watching and being patient, and see you next month. Adios. So here I am doing an end slate voiceover thingy, yeah. I just wanted to say sorry about the delay. I know I usually drop these devlogs on the last day of the month, but seriously, I was really sick last week. I could barely talk, so even if I did manage to get everything done in time, I couldn't even record the voiceover for the video. In fact, you were probably noticing that my voice is a bit screwed up still, so yeah.